It's strange how the smallest accidents can rewrite the story of an entire life. Sometimes it's the unexpected cracks in the sidewalk, the moments we curse under our breath, that lead us directly into the arms of fate. This is the story of Lila, a shy girl whose life had been built on whispers and half-glances. A girl who had spent years hiding her dreams, believing they weren't big enough, loud enough, strong enough to survive the real world. But everything changed the day she broke her heel and met him. A stranger with a smile kind enough to feel like sunlight. A stranger who would leave footprints on her heart before she even knew his name. Lila stood nervously at the edge of the busy city street, clutching a worn leather folder against her chest. Inside it, her resume. Carefully typed, meticulously proofread, and printed on expensive paper she couldn't really afford. Today was supposed to be her chance. A coveted interview at one of the top marketing firms in the city. The kind of place people sent flowers and thank you notes just for the opportunity to sit in the lobby. She had spent hours choosing her outfit. A simple navy blue dress, a pearl hairpin, sensible heels that clicked lightly against the pavement. She had even practiced her smile in the mirror. Not too wide, not too forced. You can do this, she told herself, stepping off the curb into the crosswalk as the light turned red. But halfway across the street, disaster struck. With a sickening crack, the thin heel of her right shoe gave way. The city was too big. She knew that. People disappeared here faster than morning mist. Chances like this, like him, didn't just circle back around. And yet, as Lila stood there in borrowed shoes and newfound courage, something deep inside her whispered that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the stranger was walking the streets barefoot. Somewhere, he was smiling to himself, knowing he had changed a life without expecting anything in return. But fate wasn't done with them yet. Because when two souls are meant to meet, the universe finds a way. Always. Lila stumbled forward, arms flailing, her resume slipping from her fingers and scattering across the road like lost petals. Horns blared. Someone shouted. Her heart thudded in her ears as she crouched down, frantic, trying to gather her papers. "Are you okay?" A voice, deep, calm, cut through the noise like a lifeline. She looked up, blinking through the blur of panic and embarrassment. A man knelt beside her, helping collect the papers. His hands were quick but careful, fingers brushing the pages with surprising tenderness. He was wearing a gray coat, slightly rumpled, and sneakers that looked a little too casual for downtown. His hair was dark, a little messy, like he had been running his hands through it all morning. I'm fine," Lila stammered, cheeks flaming. Her heel lay abandoned a few feet away, the broken part sticking out at an awkward angle. Her interview was in 15 minutes. There was no way she could walk properly, let alone make a good impression. The man seemed to notice the broken shoe at the same time she did. He hesitated, then made a decision so quickly it made Lila's head spin. "Here," he said, slipping off his sneakers and holding them out. "Take mine." Lila blinked at him, stunned. I can't. I don't even know you." He smiled, a crooked grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes in a way that made her chest ache unexpectedly. "You can return them later. Consider it. Good luck for your interview." The words tumbled out before she could stop herself. "How did you know about the interview?" He shrugged, a playful glint in his eye. "Well, you're carrying a resume like it's your last hope, and you're dressed like you mean business." He lowered his voice slightly. Besides, only something important could make someone look that terrified. Somehow, hearing it out loud made Lila laugh. A small, breathless sound she hadn't realized she still remembered how to make. The stranger crouched down, helping her slip off her broken heels and easing his sneakers onto her feet. They were warm, slightly too big, and smelled faintly of cedarwood soap. She looked ridiculous, but somehow she felt lighter. "Go," he said, standing up and handing her the folder. "You're gonna kill it." Lila clutched the folder to her chest, swallowing hard. "Thank you," she whispered. He winked. "Don't forget me when you're famous." Without another word, She limp-hopped across the street, sneakers slapping awkwardly against the sidewalk as she rushed toward the towering glass building ahead. The elevator ride up was a blur. Lila barely remembered checking in with the receptionist. Her mind kept replaying the moment over and over. The crack of her heel, the scrape of paper on asphalt, the stranger's steady hands gathering her life back together piece by piece. In the interview room, she sat straighter than she ever had before. When the questions came, the tough ones, the ones designed to break candidates, she thought about the stranger's easy smile, the weight of kindness heavier than fear. And somehow she answered every question. When it was over, the interviewers smiled. They shook her hand longer than necessary. She didn't dare hope yet, but the warmth in their eyes felt real. Felt earned. Outside the building, a single encounter leaves a fingerprint on your heart pounding invisible, in her ears. But impossible to bustled around her. For Lila, 1,000 the man with the gentle eyes and the borrowed sneakers had become a question mark she couldn't feel invisible. She glanced down at the two big sneakers. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again, surprising her. But somehow, she knew deep down, him, she thought. Their story wasn't over yet. But she hadn't gotten his name. The next morning, no phone Lila's phone buzzed sharply against the chipped nightstand. Just a pair of sneakers. Half awake, she grabbed it, and a memory that already felt impossibly important. An email from Whitmore and Lane Marketing. Her stomach twisted in a knot. With trembling fingers, she opened it. We are pleased to offer you a position as Junior Marketing Associate. The words blurred for a second as tears filled her eyes. She bit her lip to keep from laughing, from screaming, from doing something utterly foolish like calling every single person she knew, which realistically wasn't many. Instead, she glanced down at the sneakers sitting neatly beside her bed. Have to find him. She owed him more than a thank you. She owed him a piece of her brand new life. But where to start? That afternoon, Lila roamed the streets near where they had met. The busy intersection buzzed with the same mindless chaos. Businessmen glued to their phones, mothers tugging along sticky-fingered toddlers, students weaving through traffic like fish in a current. She asked a few shop owners, a barista at the corner cafe, a woman selling scarves from a pop-up stand. No one had seen him. She wandered into the small shoe store 2 blocks down, mostly out of desperation. The bell chimed as she entered, the scent of new leather wrapping around her. An elderly man looked up from behind the counter. Looking for something, miss? She hesitated, then held up the sneakers. I'm trying to find the man who gave me these. He was around here yesterday morning. The old man peered over his glasses, frowning slightly. Plenty of sneakers in this city. Hard to say. Lila's heart sank. She murmured a thank you and turned to leave when the man spoke again. Wait, you might try the old bookstore across the street. Young guy, always wandering in and out of there. Bit of a lost soul, if you ask me. Hope flickered in her chest like a match. She hurried across the street, sneakers slapping against the pavement. The bookstore was tucked between 2 modern buildings, almost hidden, a forgotten sliver of a world where time slowed down. The window was dusty, filled with stacks of second-hand novels and yellowing poetry collections. Inside, the air smelled like paper and rainwater. Soft classical music floated through the aisles. And there, near the back, thumbing through a battered copy of The Great Gatsby, was the stranger. He looked up as she approached, surprise flashing across his face. And then something warmer. Recognition. You found me, he said, smiling like she had done something impossible. I owed you a pair of shoes, Lila said breathlessly, holding out the sneakers. He chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. Actually, I think I like the idea of you owing me a coffee instead. She blinked, caught off guard by the ease of his words. By the way, her heart raced like a startled bird. A coffee, she repeated. Yeah, maybe. 2 coffees. One for the shoes and one for good luck. Without thinking, Lila nodded. Okay. They sat in a tiny cafe tucked around the corner, cradling mismatched mugs of steaming coffee. His name, she learned, was Ethan. He was a freelance writer, which explained the worn notebooks peeking from his backpack and the ink stain on his thumb. He didn't talk much about himself, and Lila, true to her nature, didn't push. But every once in a while, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught a flicker of something behind his easy smile. Shadow. A weight he carried alone. "You're different," he said at one point, watching her over the rim of his cup. Lila blushed. "Different how?" "Most people. They're like fireworks. Loud, flashy, over too quick." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But you're like a candle. Quiet, steady. You don't even realize how much you light up the room." No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not teachers, not friends, not even family. Something cracked open inside her, something she had locked away a long time ago. They started meeting up after that. At first, by accident, running into each other in the bookstore, at the bakery, at the park. Then, more intentionally, Ethan showed her the hidden corners of the city. Ivy-wrapped gardens behind crumbling brick walls, secret rooftop cafes where the coffee tasted like heaven and the sunsets painted the sky in bleeding gold. Lila, in return, showed him the quiet beauty of small moments. The feel of rain against your palms, the sweetness of library air, the unspoken language of glances across crowded rooms. They laughed more than they should have. They lingered longer than they meant to. One evening, as they sat watching the city lights from the steps of an old cathedral, Ethan brushed a lock of hair from her face. His fingers trembled slightly, as if the act itself was a risk. "You're brave, you know," he said softly. Lila scoffed, shaking her head. "You don't know me. I'm the shy girl who breaks her shoes and nearly cries in the street." He tilted his head, studying her. "You showed up. You didn't quit. You're standing here, chasing dreams that scare the hell out of you. That's brave." His words wrapped around her like a blanket, warming places she didn't know were frozen. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she was more than just a frightened girl in borrowed sneakers. But perfect moments never last. One rainy Thursday evening, Lila arrived at their usual meeting spot, a small park with a cracked fountain, only to find Ethan already there, pacing back and forth. Something was wrong. His shoulders were tense. His face was pale. When he saw her, he forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "Sorry. I can't stay long." "Is everything okay?" she asked, stepping closer. He hesitated, the briefest flicker of indecision, and then shrugged. "Just family stuff. Complicated." Lila wanted to ask more. Wanted to close the distance between them, to hold whatever pain he was hiding. But fear held her back. Fear of pushing too hard, of making him pull away. Instead, she nodded quietly. "Okay. I understand." Ethan gave her a long look, as if memorizing her, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. It was quick, feather-light. But Lila stood there, stunned, long after he had walked away into the misty evening. Something was slipping through her fingers, and she didn't know how to hold on. That night, Lila sat on her windowsill, watching the rain streak down the glass. Ethan had given her something she hadn't realized she needed, the belief that she could be more. But now he was slipping away, wrapped in secrets he wasn't ready to share. Some stories start with broken heels and borrowed shoes. Some stories are stitched together by laughter and stolen moments. But the best stories, the ones that matter, are the ones you fight to keep alive. And Lila wasn't ready to let go just yet. Not when she had just found the one person who saw her for who she truly was. Somewhere out there, Ethan was facing his own battles. And soon, she would discover just how dark those battles could be. Because love isn't always enough to save someone. That night, Lila sat on her windowsill, watching the rain streak down the glass. Ethan had given her something she hadn't realized she needed, the belief that she could be more. But now he was slipping away, wrapped in secrets he wasn't ready to share. Some stories start with broken heels and borrowed shoes. Some stories are stitched together by laughter and stolen moments. But the best stories, the ones that matter, are the ones you fight to keep alive. And Lila wasn't ready to let go just yet. Not when she had just found the one person who saw her for who she truly was. Somewhere out there, Ethan was facing his own battles. And soon, she would discover just how dark those battles could be. Because love isn't always enough to save someone. Sometimes you have to be willing to break. Just to reach them. Days passed. Ethan's absence hung over Lila like a gray sky refusing to break. No text, no calls, just silence. Deep, heavy, cruel. First she made excuses. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he needed space. But deep down, a gnawing fear began to take root. Maybe he was never coming back. Maybe she had been nothing more than a fleeting moment in his storm. At work, Lila threw herself into her new role with mechanical precision. Reports, meetings, deadlines. The office buzzed around her, a hive of ambition and polished smiles. But even in the crowded elevators and glass-walled conference rooms, she felt alone. Every coffee shop reminded her of him. Every page of a worn book whispered his name. Still she told herself it was fine. She had lived her life in the background before. She could do it again. Until one rainy Friday, everything shattered. It started with a news alert on her phone. Local writer hospitalized after overdose attempt. The name wasn't given, but the bookstore address was. Her blood turned to ice. Without thinking, Lila grabbed her coat and ran, out of the office, down the stairs, into the storm-soaked streets. She didn't care about the curious glances. She didn't care about the puddles soaking her sensible heels. All she cared about was getting to him. The hospital smelled like bleach and despair. Lila's hands trembled as she approached the front desk. The nurse looked up, weary but kind. "I'm here for Ethan," she whispered, barely able to force the words out. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Room 214. He's stable now, but he's not taking visitors easily." Lila didn't care. She needed to see him. Needed to tell him he wasn't alone. She found him lying in the bed, pale and fragile under the fluorescent lights. For a moment she couldn't breathe. This wasn't the Ethan she knew. The boy with laughter in his eyes and a secret in his smile. This was someone broken, drowning in an ocean she hadn't even seen. His eyes flickered open when she stepped inside. First confusion. "Lila," he rasped, voice cracked and hollow. "You shouldn't be here." She crossed the room in 3 long strides, sinking into the chair beside him. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said firmly. He turned his face away, staring at the wall. "I didn't want you to see me like this." She reached out, her fingers curling lightly around his. "You don't have to be perfect for me, Ethan," she whispered. Tears welled in his eyes, the first crack in his carefully built armor. "I didn't know how to tell you," he whispered. "I didn't know how to be enough for you." Lila squeezed his hand tighter. "You already are." Slowly, painfully, the truth came out. Ethan had been struggling for years. A silent war inside his own mind. Pressure from family to succeed. To be someone he didn't recognize when he looked in the mirror. Career that felt hollow. Dreams he was too scared to chase. He had carried the weight alone for so long that he forgot what it felt like to be helped. "I thought if you saw the real me," he said, "you'd leave." Lila's heart broke for him. For the boy who thought love was conditional, who thought kindness was something you had to earn. "I'm not leaving," she said fiercely. "Not now. Not ever." The doctor said he could be discharged in a few days, provided he agreed to outpatient therapy. At first, Ethan resisted. "I'm fine," he said. "I can handle it." But Lila wasn't shy anymore. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Real strength isn't pretending you're okay. It's asking for help when you need it." Slowly he nodded. And in that moment, a tiny seed of healing was planted. Not just for Ethan, but for both of them. They walked out of the hospital together 3 days later. Ethan in a too big hoodie, Lila still wearing the same pair of sneakers he had once given her. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The road ahead would be messy, painful, uncertain. But for the first time they were walking it side by side. And somehow that was enough. Love doesn't fix broken hearts like magic glue. It doesn't erase pain or silence old ghosts. But sometimes it hands you a pair of borrowed shoes and says, "I'll walk with you through rain, through fear, through everything." Lila and Ethan had found each other in the middle of chaos. And as they disappeared into the misty city streets, hands clasped tightly together, it was clear that their real journey was only just beginning. Because love, real love, is not the absence of scars. It's the decision to stay, even when the world says to run. Some storms don't pass overnight. Some wounds take longer to heal than we dare admit. Lila knew loving Ethan meant stepping into the unknown, where days blurred into struggle, and victories were measured in whispered promises and fragile smiles. But when you love someone deeply, you don't count the cost. You simply stay. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. The first few weeks after Ethan's hospital discharge were raw, unpredictable, and at times overwhelming. Some mornings Ethan seemed like his old self, teasing Lila over burnt toast, sketching out plans for a novel he claimed would rock the literary world. Other days he barely got out of bed, barely spoke, barely existed. Lila quickly learned that healing wasn't linear. There were no straight lines, no perfect answers. But she was there, steady, stubborn, devoted. She moved into a small apartment 2 streets away from Ethan's, close enough to reach him when he needed her, far enough to give him the space he sometimes craved. She still went to work every day, climbing the corporate ladder with quiet grit, but Ethan was never far from her mind. They developed a rhythm of sorts, late-night phone calls when the fear crept too close, handwritten notes tucked into jacket pockets, coffee cups left on doorsteps with silly doodles drawn in Sharpie. Small things, real things. Love, Lila realized, wasn't grand declarations or sweeping gestures. It was showing up, over and over again. One Sunday afternoon, as autumn bled into winter, Ethan surprised her. He showed up at her apartment with a bouquet of wildflowers. Messy, uneven, but heartbreakingly beautiful. "I'm ready," he said, voice trembling. Lila blinked in confusion. "Ready for what?" He took a deep breath. "Therapy. Medication. All of it. I'm tired of surviving. I want to live." Tears blurred her vision as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. More proud than words could ever say. Therapy wasn't a miracle, but it was a beginning. Ethan started seeing a counselor twice a week. He began journaling again, filling worn notebooks with his fears, his hopes, his dreams. He even started submitting short stories to small literary magazines, fueled by Lila's endless encouragement. Some got rejected. A few got published. Each small victory stitched a little more light into the darkness. But happiness, as they both knew too well, is often fragile. Late one evening, after a quiet dinner at their favorite rooftop cafe, Ethan grew distant. He stared at the skyline, fingers clenching his coffee cup so tightly Lila feared it would shatter. "Ethan," she said gently. He didn't look at her, just whispered, "I'm scared." She reached out, covering his hand with hers. "Of what?" He turned to her then, eyes filled with a sadness so deep it made her chest ache. "Of losing you." The confession hit her like a physical blow. "You won't," she said fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere." But he shook his head, tears pooling in his lashes. "You deserve someone better, stronger." Lila stood, pulling him up with her. Without a word, she placed his hand over her racing heart. "Feel that," she whispered. "That's yours. Always has been." Ethan closed his eyes, breathing in the trembling beat of her love, letting it anchor him, letting it save him, if only for a little while. The seasons shifted around them, fiery leaves falling like promises at their feet. They built a life together, imperfect but real. Shared groceries, shared dreams, shared the deep, aching knowledge that life could crumble at any moment. And still, it was worth building anyway. Ethan proposed in the most Ethan way imaginable. awkwardly, nervously, with a ring made of braided grass during a picnic in the park where they had first met. Lila laughed so hard she cried. Then she said yes, without hesitation, without fear. Because sometimes, love isn't a lightning bolt or a grand epiphany. Sometimes it's a shy girl standing barefoot in a muddy field, saying yes to a boy who once offered her his shoes without asking for anything in return. The wedding was small, just a handful of close friends, a borrowed chapel, and a slightly crooked cake Ethan insisted on baking himself. Lila walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress and, tucked carefully under her hem, the same battered sneakers Ethan had once lent her. A reminder of where they started. A promise of where they were going. When Ethan saw her, he broke into tears he didn't bother hiding. Lila smiled through her own. They exchanged vows written on crumpled pieces of notebook paper. Vows full of trembling honesty, messy hope, and wild, stubborn love. I promise to stay. I promise to fight. I promise to believe, even when it's hard. When they kissed, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. And for the first time in a long time, Lila didn't feel shy. She felt seen. Chosen. Not every love story is easy. Not every love story is loud. Some love stories are stitched together with borrowed shoes, broken heels, and whispered promises in the dark. Some love stories aren't about rescuing or fixing. They're about staying, fighting, believing. Lila and Ethan's story wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. It was theirs. And sometimes that's more than enough. Because in the end, the shy girl who once broke her heel before a job interview didn't just find a new pair of shoes. She found her forever. Some love stories aren't written in ink. They're etched into the spaces between heartbeats, whispered across years, stitched through every ordinary, aching, extraordinary day. Lila and Ethan had walked through storms together. But even after vows were exchanged and rings slid onto trembling fingers, life had one more twist in store for them. One more chance to prove that love, real love, is a choice you make again and again. The first year of marriage was messy, beautiful, and harder than either of them had expected. Ethan's writing career began to grow, slowly but surely. A few short stories gained traction online. A tiny, loyal audience started forming. People who resonated with his brutal honesty and raw hope. Lila thrived at work too, promoted twice within 18 months. They celebrated victories with cheap champagne and pizza on the floor of their tiny apartment. They comforted each other through rejections and bad days with whispered words and late-night drives to nowhere. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for a while that was enough. Until the phone call came. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Gray skies outside, the kind of day that made the world feel heavy. Lila was sitting at her desk when her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. A voice she didn't expect. This is Dr. Marin from City General. I'm calling about Ethan. The world tilted. Words like accident and head trauma blurred into meaningless noise. All Lila knew was that she was running. Running out of the office into a cab, through endless hospital hallways. When she finally found him, he was lying in a sterile white room, a bandage around his head, machines beeping in steady rhythms. Alive, breathing, but different. The doctors explained that Ethan had slipped on a slick patch of sidewalk, hitting his head hard enough to cause a minor brain injury. Temporary memory loss, they said. Confusion. Possible emotional changes. It could heal over time. Or it could not. There were no guarantees. When Ethan opened his eyes and looked at her, it was like a knife through Lila's heart. There was no recognition, no flicker of warmth, just polite confusion. "Are you my nurse?" he asked weakly. Lila smiled through the shattering of her soul. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm someone who loves you very much." He nodded absently, already looking past her. The doctors said patience was key. Familiarity could return with time. Memories might rebuild themselves like a jigsaw puzzle slowly fitting back together. But there were no promises. And so, once again, Lila faced a choice. Or walk away. She didn't even hesitate. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of her life. Ethan was a stranger now. Cautious, distant, easily overwhelmed. He flinched at sudden noises. Forgot conversations within hours. Sometimes stared at her like she was a ghost he almost remembered but couldn't quite name. But Lila stayed. She stayed when he lashed out in frustration. She stayed when he broke down crying, terrified by his own blankness. She stayed when friends suggested she move on, when even family members gently asked if she was holding on too tightly. She stayed because love isn't just staying when it's easy. It's staying when every fiber of your heart feels like it's breaking. Slowly, tiny flickers of the old Ethan began to surface. One rainy evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie he didn't remember picking out, Ethan turned to her and said, "Your smile. It feels familiar." Lila's breath caught. "It should," she whispered. "You make me feel safe," he said quietly, almost like a confession. She smiled through the tears threatening to fall. "You once gave me your shoes," she said, voice soft with memory. "When I needed them most." Ethan frowned slightly, as if trying to grasp a dream fading in the morning light. "Sounds like something I'd do," he murmured. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Lila laughed. A real, messy, joyous laugh. Because somewhere deep inside him Ethan was still there. Still fighting his way back to her. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Sunday morning. Lila was making pancakes, Ethan's favorite, though he didn't remember that yet, when he wandered into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He watched her for a long moment, head tilted slightly. Then he said, in a voice so full of wonder it made her chest ache, "You're the girl with the broken heel." The spatula clattered from her hands. She turned, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I am." He stepped closer, hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty. "And I'm the guy who gave you his shoes," he said, as if piecing together a sacred truth. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. A slow smile broke across his face. Shy, sweet, familiar. "Guess I've been falling for you a long time, huh?" he said. And just like that the dam broke. Lila ran into his arms, sobbing, laughing, clutching him like she'd never let go. Because love, real love, endures even the darkest nights. Survives even when memories fade. It rebuilds itself again and again in the spaces where hope refuses to die. They never had the storybook life. There were still hard days. Still forgotten anniversaries and moments of aching loss. But there were also inside jokes rediscovered, favorite songs replayed until they became new again, and slow dances in the kitchen lit by nothing but the glow of the refrigerator light. There was a love, stubborn, patient, infinite, that defied even time itself. Lila and Ethan didn't just find each other once. They chose each other. Every day. Every heartbeat. Every whispered promise in the dark. Because sometimes a broken heel and a pair of borrowed shoes are just the beginning. Sometimes the real love story is the one you choose to keep writing, together, even when the pages get torn. And as they stood together in their tiny kitchen, pancakes burning on the stove, laughing like fools, it was clear that Lila and Ethan's story wasn't over. Not even close. It was just beginning.